This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Can you? Acha, good. So, today we will be taking up a new topic that is autosclerosis. So, auto means the ear and sclerosis means like how you got sclerosis of the mastoid, where the normal air spaces are filled up by uh, the new bone formation. So it's a common disorder of bony labyrinth. So unique to the endochondrial layer and known to affect humans only. So apart from humans, other animals, no one has. Till now, there is no any such information that they suffer from autosclerosis. So hereditary osseous dysplasia of a petrous temporal bone. Alternate phases of bone resorption and formation. So that thing will be going on simultaneously, bone formation and resorption. Where what it happens as this process continues, the normal lamellar bone is replaced by spongy bone, which has three characteristics. It is highly cellular, it is more thick and more vascular. So what happens when this thing happens? No, the mobility of the foot plate is compromised. So once the mobility of foot plate is compromised, this leads to hearing loss. That is mostly a conductive type of hearing loss. So brief history of the disease. This was first described by Valsalva in 1701, and the term autosclerosis is coined by Pulitzer in 1894. So etiology, the cause is unknown, and few people say that prior infection with measles, what it does, it leads to cell degeneration in the labyrinthine bone, and the hidden antigens are exposed, and there are persons who are genetically predisposed to develop intolerance to these antigens, lead to autosclerosis. And another thing is the heredity factor, transmitting. It is autosomal dominant inheritance with partial penetrance or incomplete penetrance, and also it is associated with certain syndromes like Van der Hoof syndrome, where you have the blue sclera, osteogenesis imperfecta, and autosclerosis. So the triad of Van der Hoof syndrome is blue sclera, osteogenesis imperfecta, and autosclerosis. So classification, it divided into two types: stapedial type and a cochlear type. So stapedial type has an anterior focus that is called fistula antefenestrum, means anterior to the foot plate area is the starting point. This is the most common. That is major part, around 70% to 80% cases develop from the anterior focus. Then you have the posterior focus, the fistula post fenestrum. Then you have the biscuit type and a circumferential type. So the circumferential type involves the whole of the annular ligament all around. And then another type is not mentioned here is the obliterative type, where there is extensive bone deposition to such an extent that it's very difficult to make out even the foot plate area also. So this is very difficult if you encounter a obliterative type of autosclerosis, then it's a real challenge for the ENT surgeon. Then you have the cochlear type, where the round window area or other areas of otic capsule are involved. So the cochlear autosclerosis usually they present to us with a sensory neural hearing loss. So you will have a sensory neural or the sensory component to it, whereas in stapedial type of otosclerosis, it is mostly the conductive component. And these histological type may be detected on post-mortem examination, and so autosclerosis may also be related to measles of the otic capsule. So already we have discussed about. So after the advent of MMR vaccine, the incidence have come down, but still the incidence secondary to measles infection has come down. But the other things like hereditary or Van der Rohe syndrome, all these things persist. Perilymph of patient of autosclerosis have elevated level of antibody to measles virus. So this is an established fact. It is not an assumption, but an established fact that measles infection predispose the person to autosclerosis because they have found out antibodies in the perilymph of the patients. Incidence more commonly seen in women in the ratio of 2:1, and bilateral disease is more common in females. So, genetically, I told you autosomal dominant with incomplete penetrance, and pathology is the site is fistula antefenestrum. So, already we have discussed this is the most common site. So there is perivascular bony resorption due to osteoclastic and giant cell activity. So if you see the autosclerosis, no, it doesn't. It develops slowly over a period of time. So the initial phase or the active phase is known as autospongiosis. So autospongiosis is the phase where there is increased vascularity or the blood vessels are become very much prominent over the foot plate area and promontory. So when you have a look through a otoscope, you get a flamingo pink sign. So the tympanic membrane will look pink in color, and that is due to the increased blood vessels over the promontory area. So this flamingo pink sign is seen in autospongiosis, but autosclerosis is the mature part. So autospongiosis is the where the disease is still progressing, and the terminal stage is called autosclerosis. So where the bony destruction and lamellar bone has been completely replaced by the spongy bone. So and then what happens as the vascularity increases, no, the osteoclast and osteoblast come into the through the bloodstream, and then the then the bony resorption and bony and bone deposition takes on simultaneously, goes on simultaneously. So immature bone is laid down, which is deficient in collagen and rich in ground substance. So, and the cycle of bone resorption and formation continues. So there is inversion of collagen to ground substance ratio leading to autosclerotic. So here the collagen ratio comes down and the ground substance ratio increases, and ultimately it reverses, and that leads to a autosclerotic bone. Now, clinical presentation, mostly in the age of 20 to 30-year group, and increased progression occurs during pregnancy and menopause. So pregnancy, usually when you female comes to you know with a complaint of hearing loss, which is progressive in nature, and when you examine the patient and find that the tympanic membrane is intact, and then you do the tuning fork test and find a conductive hearing loss, then the first thing to be ruled out is autosclerosis. So in this condition, no, if you ask the patient properly when when she noticed the hearing loss, whether it was just after the delivery of the child, then the patient will tell, yes, after the delivery of the child, my hearing started to decrease and it is slowly progress. So it should progress, and but it is not the rule. But majority cases you can find this, you can elicit this history. So hearing loss and low modulated voice. So why low modulated voice? Because uh, they can hear their own voice. Who have a conductive hearing loss voice very clearly. So that is why this patient will speak with a very soft voice, whereas the reverse occurs with the sensory neural hearing loss, because they hear their own voice, so they have to their intensity. So that's what happens. The intensity of a sensory neural hearing loss patient is very high compared to that of a patient suffering from conductive hearing loss. Then you have paracusis willisii. So paracusis willisii, paracusis willisii is a patient hears better in a noisy environment. So normally, if you see normal person, they don't hear better in a noisy environment. But these patients will typically say that we hear better in a noisy environment. Why? Because so the person, suppose you are on a cricket field and you are watching some match. Suppose a friend wants to tell you something. So if to you at a normal voice, then obviously the background noise will suppress it. So he or she has to speak to you at a little louder voice. So when the person uses a louder voice, it crosses the threshold of hearing, and then the autosclerotic person is able to hear nicely. So this is called paracusis willisii, where the patient hears better in a noisy environment. So that is called as that is seen in autosclerosis. So tinnitus is seen in cochlear autosclerosis and vertigo. So normally in tinnitus and vertigo, you don't get in a cochlear type of in a stapedial autosclerosis, but in a cochlear type you have tinnitus and vertigo. And always remember, a person who is complaining of more of vertigo and hearing loss, then try to rule out other conditions like Meniere's disease, so that you don't land up in trouble. And positive family history is seen in only 50% of cases. And on examination, see that sign. There is Schwarz sign. Schwarz sign is that flamingo pink appearance you see when you examine through your otoscope. But we seldom see that, because that is usually seen in the early stage of the disease, where the patient may or may not be aware of the hearing loss. And usually when the patient comes to you, the tympanic membrane looks almost near normal, although so many things are written atrophic, thickened, rigid, but they are near normal only. So in early stage, the low frequency hearing loss is there, and this is due to stiffness of the ossicular chain. But in the late stage, the mid and high frequency, and there is widening of the air bone gap, and this occurs due to fixation of the foot plate and the mass effect. Mass effect is seen particularly when you have a big like obliterative autosclerosis. So in this, so at the late stage there will be fixation, but in the early stage there will be stiffness of the ossicular chain. Carhart notch at 2000 hertz. That is what is a Carhart notch? A Carhart notch is a dip in the bone conduction at 2000 hertz. As you know, the fundamental vibrating frequency of the oscillator chain is 2000 hertz. So the fixation of the foot plate as well as the mass effect leads to Carhart notch. So, and the speech audiometry, in speech audiometry, if the speech discrimination score of less than 70% militates against operative intervention, mitigates it. Ideally, the speech discrimination score should be more than 70% to operate. So, speech discrimination score is to different is the score in which they able to identify two different words and you could give around 20 to 50 words to the person and the person replies back to you what he or she has heard, and from there you get the speech discrimination score. Very, very particularly and that can be only known when you do a speech audiometry. This type of curve and stapedial reflex will be absent, monitors progression of disease and it will be lost in the fixation of footprint. So that stapedial reflex also you can do it with the tympanometry and if the stapedial reflex is absent means that indicates that there has been fixation of the foot plate area. Radiology CT scan to recognize obliterative otosclerosis operative. So you have to do a high resolution CT scan, not plain CT scan. It is known as HR CT scan to see the foci. And now also they use densitometry. So to see the density of the bone. So densitometry also is used, and this densitometry will tell you whether the bone is normal density or abnormal density. So densitometry has more use, particularly in otosclerosis. So depending on the amount of otosclerotic foci in the region of foot plate, they are divided into type 1 otosclerosis, where less than half of the foot plate is involved and normal thin bluish appearance of the foot plate is retained. Type 2, more than half of the foot plate is involved with the thickening of the foot plate. Type 3, whole of the foot plate is involved, and type 4 is obliterative otosclerosis. So type 1, where you can still appreciate the bluish appearance of the foot plate, and type 2, the foot plate is thickened, and type 3, whole of the foot plate is involved by the otosclerosis, and type 4 is obliterative otosclerosis. So Carhart notch is due to loss of inertial component of bone conduction by stapes fixation and disruption of normal ossicular resonance happening at 2000 Hz. So we have already discussed these two. So loss of the inertial component of bone conduction by fixation. Fixation also leads to a development of Carhart notch and disruption of normal ossicular resonance. So the norm is also ossicular vibration that happens around 2000 Hz also lost. So this leads to development of Carhart notch. So active lesions are recognized by spongy structure, immature osseous tissue with numerous dilated vascular channel with osteoclastic joints. These are histological findings. So and inactive lesions are solid, compact, lamellar, mosaic-like tissue containing thin, narrow spaces and small, infrequent blood vessels. So you can see the blood vessels, which was very much numerous in the active lesion, has become infrequent in the inactive lesion, and even the tiny narrow spaces are also quite reduced. So differential diagnosis. So you can say a differential diagnosis means person complaining of hearing loss with an intact tympanic membrane. So might occur due to ossicular discontinuity or congenital fixation of ossicles, most congenital fixation of the head of the malleus, which occurs in the etic area, or uh, media with effusion, fixed malleus syndrome, and tympanosclerosis, sensorineural hearing results in of the malleus head. Then osteoperfecta, progressive, conductive, and sensorineural hearing loss. But here the Schwartz size is absent, and also vertigo is not present. So I told you the triad of Van der Hoof syndrome, where you have blue sclera, osteogenesis perfecta, and autosclerosis. Now, indication. Now, here coming to the treatment part. Treatment, medical treatment. Nowadays, most of the people are for medical treatment, particularly in a cochlear autosclerosis. So, cochlear autosclerosis, there is no role for surgery. There, you have to give a hearing aid to the patient. And previously, we used to give sodium fluoride. Sodium fluoride was given as a medical treatment for autosclerosis. And a situation where still in certain cases you cannot operate, like say here, like a sports person, that is a person, suppose he is a weightlifter, you cannot operate this patient. The moment the patient strains, the piston is thrown out and patient will develop total hearing loss. Or hearing, only 1 ear is working, other ear is totally dead, and the only working ear has autosclerosis. So it is always advisable to go for a hearing aid. Age more than 70 years and pregnancy is a contraindication. Cochlear autosclerosis or stapedial autosclerosis with poor airborne gap. So it should be at least 30 decibel gap. So the airborne gap should be at least 30 decibel. So for the that is one of the indications for stapes surgery. So if the airborne gap is less, then it is a contraindication. Then poor speech discrimination score and recent history of vertigo. So when you have a poor discrimination score and vertigo, no, you rule out other conditions like Meniere's disease also. So very important that I told you in the beginning, that patient presenting to you with hearing loss and vertigo, don't rush in and do the surgery. That will be a catastrophic effect. So airborne gap of at least 30 decibel for speech frequencies of 500, 1K and 2K. Negative RENAID test result for 256 and 512 hertz, and speech discrimination score of at least more than 60%. These three are the main indication for stapes surgery. And the contraindication, there are a lot of contraindications. So as a ENT surgeon, you should be very selective when you take the patient for stapes surgery, because it's a result oriented surgery. Either if you go little wrong, then the patient will totally lose the hearing. That ear will be useless to the patient. So that is why the selection of patients should be done very cautiously. Treatment, non-surgical, we have discussed. I told you, hearing aid and sodium fluoride. And sodium fluoride, what it does is it causes early maturation of the lesion. So the autospongiotic foci is converted to autosclerotic foci at a little faster pace. At a little faster pace. So then what happens is the amount of bone which was supposed to be involved by autosclerosis is limited. So that is how it helps actually by controlling the extent of involvement by the autosclerosis. The surgery of stapes has evolved over a period of time. So there are 2 to 3 phases actually. It is not mentioned here. I will tell you. The first phase is the phase of mobilization. So where mobilization was, they just particularly in the early stage when there is ankylosis or there is stiffness of the ossicular chain. So in those conditions, if you mobilize it, then this breaks the ankylosis or stiffness, and the hearing improves. But subsequently, again the stiffness develops. So that happened. Then the next surgery, next phase went into the fenestration operation, which was very much goes by the name of Lampert. The credit of fenestration surgery goes to Lampert. So, what is the idea behind the fenestration operation? So, to have a perfect hearing or a good hearing, there should be 2 windows. Like you see, to ventilate a room, you should have 2 windows opposite to each other. Then only, or at least on either wall, on facing wall, so that the room will be ventilated. So, simultaneously, so same like that, you need 2 functioning window for good hearing. Now, one window is fixed by autosclerosis. So they create another window in the lateral semicircular canal. So this window is known as the third window, and that go or fenestration operation. Then after the fenestration operation, then came the phase of stapedectomy, and then here whole foot plate is removed. Initially, the whole foot plate was removed, and then the soft tissue was used to cover the foot plate area, and then they used to uh, keep a piston to for hearing. But sorry, but there was a chance of foot plate dislodging and going into the inner ear also. So slowly what happened ki the stapedectomy gave way to stepidotomy. So stepidotomy is you make an opening in the foot plate area, but you don't remove the foot plate. You keep it as such, you make an opening and you put the piston. Then came the small fenestra stepidotomy. So here, even at the opening size, which was little bigger initially, now they even made it still smaller, and now they're making the fenestra with the help of laser. That is called as a laser stepidotomy. So technique, pre-operative preparation. Patient should be fully informed about uncertainties and risk of operation. Very important. You have to tell the patient that there is always a chance of total hearing loss. Means the hearing maybe it might also result in a dead ear also. Written disclosure of risk and result should be signed by the patient. So that is we do when patient goes for mastered operation, we take the facial nerve consent. Even in carotid surgery, you take the facial nerve risk consent should be taken before the operation, before the patient is shifted to the surgery room. Why? Because this form which is being signed or declaration which is being signed by the patient, it says that after knowing all the uncertainties or complications, I voluntarily agreed to undergo the surgery. So there may be problem with the taste. The taste also may be affected by, because sometimes while elevating the tympanomeatal flap, you might tear the chorda tympani. Post-operative dizziness will be there because you are creating a controlled fistula. So definitely there will be dizziness. Paralysis of facial nerve as a possible complication. So why paralysis of facial nerve? Because what happens if you know that the facial nerve is housed in the fallopian canal. So this question will be, sir, if it is housed in a bony canal, how we can paralyze it? No. Now, if it is housed in the fallopian, no paralysis. But dehiscent or a abnormally placed facial nerve stand up with causing facial. So what happens sometimes and covers the um, foot plate area. So in that condition, if you have a good exposure or a good hand, you can go ahead. You can just push the facial nerve away from the field and still do. But this Anistra of the facial nerve or handling can result mere touching grade 1, grade 2 house Blackman paralysis. So you should keep that in mind also. So the facial paralysis is seen in less than 1% of days after surgery as a result of activation in chorda tympani and facial nerve by trauma of operation. So if the fallopian canal is intact, activation of the herpes. It can also result due to overheating in case of laser surgery or direct trauma in case of dehiscent fallopian canal or aberrant facial nerve. So when you are putting a laser, no, it generates a lot of heat. So particularly, thereby what happens if it hits the facial nerve, the fallopian canal also, the heat is transmitted that can lead to thermal damage of the facial or direct trauma in case of a dehiscent fallopian canal where the nerve falls over the foot plate area or a aberrant facial. So before venturing into surgery, make sure that there is no infection of the external and middle ear. It is very, very important. There should be no otitis externa or otitis media, because if you are doing it in case of otitis media patient, then what happens when you are doing the fenestra, the infection can be transmitted and the patient may land up with a serous or purulent labyrinthitis leading to hearing loss. So always remember that there should be no otitis externa or media. So anesthesia can be done under local or general anesthesia. There are different proponents. Those who do under local anesthesia, they say that the patient can appreciate the on-table hearing, and so that you also will know that the procedure has gone well. General anesthesia, you can take your time, and the patient, some cases of local when the local anesthetic agent is given in little excess, no, then the patient goes into a different level where he or she doesn't respond to the command of the surgeon. So in those conditions, uh, you have to either convert it into a general anesthesia or abandon the procedure. So where the patient will be moving the head voluntarily of his or her own wish and not listening to the surgeon to keep it steady. I had been to a workshop where Dr. Ravi Ramalingam was about to operate a stapes under local anesthesia, and the anesthesia which was given to the patient, I don't know what was given, but he was moving throughout the surgery. So he told me, no, no, I can't do like this. And then the patient was intubated and given general anesthesia, and he completed the surgery. So local anesthesia advantage is cause less intraoperative bleeding and hearing assessment on table urine. Autograft tissue can be used to cover the oval window, including vein graft, then temporalis fascia, perichondrium, and fat. So among them, the best two, if you ask me, will be a vein or a fat. So we use here what we use mostly we use fat to seal the remaining to seal the fenestra. Exposure of oval window, these are the steps, elevation of tympanomeatal flap. So tympanomeatal flap, the incision is given starts at 12 o'clock, then comes to 9 and goes up to 6 o'clock. So at 12 o'clock, the incision starts 3 millimeter lateral to the margin, and then at the time you come to 9 o'clock, you are around 6 to 8 millimeter away from the fibrous annulus. Again, when you go to 6 o'clock, you go back to 3 millimeter, 3 o'clock, the distance away from the uh, fibrous annulus. So it is rather little oblong. Why this is given incision? This is given is when you replace the flap back node, it doesn't fall into the middle ear. If you make a small flap node and replace it back, it tends to fall into the middle ear. So that won't happen. And after elevating the flap, then you visualize you. So this flap elevation and all are done with the help of an operating microscope, and the incision is always transcanal, or in sometimes so you can, particularly in a very narrow canal, you can go for an endoral incision. Otherwise, most of the cases, endomeatal incision is more than enough. So while elevation of the flap, it should be done very gently. Make sure you don't tear the flap, and gently elevate till you reach the fibrous annulus. Elevate the fibrous annulus, and then elevate superiorly and inferiorly, and then go as far as anteriorly till you see the manubrium of the uh, malleus. So elevate the flap, and then after elevating the flap, you are in the middle ear now, and then you try to see the find the incus, see the infundostapedial joint, and try to visualize the foot plate area. So for that, you need to work on a higher magnification, which is there in our what you say, the operating microscope. So you can go to higher magnification, and then you go for removal of posterior superior bony overhang. So majority of cases, no, you cannot appreciate the infundostapedial joint. So in those conditions, you have to curate it out. Some people drill it. Those who have a good control over their finger, over their hand, they can drill it. But for beginners, it is always better to curate it. So slowly, slowly, why curating means you have more control, and you can take smaller bits and pieces of bone so that it doesn't lead to injury to the cauda tympani or injury to the infundostapedial joint. So how much to curate? So you have to curate till you see the base of the pyramid. So where the base of the pyramid comes, no, you have to stop there, because just beyond that, if you curate, you may injure the facial nerve also. So till the base of pyramid. And another thing is the two-third of the length of long process of incus should be visible to you. Two-third of the long process of incus should be visible to you, and you curate right up to the base of pyramid. So here you have to spend some time by doing a proper exposure of the overlay. So a proper exposure is required. So it will take some time, but you should not push yourself here. Rather, you enjoy, and when you do a good exposure, no, then the critical part you will have less trouble. So you can do the fenestra nicely, you can put the piston in one go. So here if you compromise the time, no, and struggle there, then that is more of a disaster. So in that you have to release the cauda tympani nerve and displace it upward or downward, and remove the bone till you see the facial canal and the pyramidal eminence. So facial canal, the fallopian canal, you can make out the elevation. If you are not able to make out, keep the pyramid as your goal, as your benchmark. So till the base of the pyramid, you can curate. You can curate without causing any complication. So while curating also, you should not try to take a big chunk out of it, so that what happens, suddenly uh, the curate might flip from your hand and hit the ossicular chain. So and the curate should be from above down or from medial to lateral, never from below up or from lateral to medial. So it should be always above down or medial to lateral. So in that condition, slowly you deal with the overhang. Then removal of stapes superstructure. This we are telling you the what you say, the stapedectomy. Then here, after visualizing, after proper exposure, and try to remove any bone debris, whatever it is there. And before, when you are curating, no, at that time you can keep a gel foam soaked in adrenaline over the foot plate area. So and then when you finish the curating part, you remove the gel foam with the help of suction, and then give a good wash to the middle ear cavity. So and after giving a thorough wash, you do suction out all the saline, and then go to a still higher magnification to visualize the foot plate area. Now here what the first thing you do is you separate the infundostapedial joint using an angled joint knife or pick, whatever it is. So after separating it, you make a safety hole in the foot plate prior to fracturing the superstructure. So you make a safety hole. Safety hole means why it is done is when you are fracturing the superstructure, no, the foot plate doesn't. So before that, to prevent that, you make a small fenestra in the foot plate. So the fenestra are usually made in the posterior one-third of the foot plate area, never on the middle or anterior one-third. Why? Because in the posterior one-third, no, the utricle lies a little more medially than the saccule. So this, whereas the saccule lies very close to the foot plate. So what happens, the near drilling also, if the drill or whatever instrument you are using to make a fenestra touches or injures the saccule, it may result in severe vertigo and also hearing loss. So should be careful on that aspect, that whenever you are doing a stapedectomy, uh, you remove only the posterior one third of the foot plate area. And when you are doing a stapedotomy, you make the fenestra in the posterior one. Then crura can be severed using crurotomy scissors. So before seeing the crura, what happens is the stapedius muscle will be covering the posterior crura. So once you remove the stapedius muscle, then you can see the posterior crura. So here what they do is they uh, cut the stapedius muscle, and then they do the crurotomy or remove the crura. In case of where you are using a laser, you can vaporize the superstructure using an argon or carbon dioxide laser. And this using a laser is causes very minimal trauma. Okay, so it's already time. Next class we will be. I will finish it off. Very few slides are there. The steps, and then different type of prosthesis, and some special complications or problems which we encounter. So, any doubt? Any doubt?
No, sir.
All of you could understand? Anyone who could not understand, you can put it in the chat, the question. Uh, okay, so thank you. We'll meet on next Friday.
Thank you, sir.